It's officially political debate season, and the two Portland City Commissioners up for re-election are facing off against a lot of challengers.
Police have a rooted history in white supremacy and harm.
We must end what some have called the defund police culture.
It's very much a good old boys club.
The Washington State Patrol has had a diversity problem for decades that has not gotten any better.
I was told that I was too smart for my own good and I should probably consider another profession.
So now a group of black female troopers are trying to change that. Here's the story. I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. All the ways to communicate with us right there at the bottom of your screen, and we do want you to communicate. You can even shout at your TV, but it's more effective if you send us an email. The address is thestory@kgw.com. Use the hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter, or you can call us and leave us a good old-fashioned voicemail. Our phone number is 503-226-5090. Let's begin with some Portland City politics. Now, lots of you have told us that you think city leadership here lacks leadership and is to blame for a lot of the things that are wrong with our city. I'm going to hold back on my opinion for now anyway, but this week we are getting a good look at two Portland City Council members and their top challengers through debates. Now, I have to say the debates are on Zoom, which is not exactly the most exciting thing you've ever seen, but I want you to pay attention, because what they say and who they are, that does matter. We'll start with the debate for the seat Jo Ann Hardesty currently holds. Christine Pitawanich has our story.
And to everyone, welcome to City Club's candidate debate for Portland City Council position number 3.
Thursday morning, 3 candidates vying for a Portland City Council seat fielded questions via Zoom in a City Club of Portland debate, hoping to sway voters their way.
Our government has been dysfunctional for too long.
Portland is facing a historic threat to its livability.
My biggest honors in life has been to serve as your Portland City Commissioner, position 3.
Here's a quick snapshot of who they are. Rene Gonzalez is an attorney who owns a legal and consulting practice. Vadim Mozyrski is an administrative law judge who focuses on disability law and advocates for immigrant and refugee communities. Jo Ann Hardesty is the incumbent. She's the first Black woman elected to City Council, a veteran and civil rights leader. They are a part of a group of 11 people running for City Council position 3 in the city of Portland. A number of topics were addressed. One of them, the lack of affordable housing.
We have to stop driving away small landlords.
I think we should let the developers do the private market, and the city should be focused on making sure that workers and low-income people are able to thrive and prosper within the city of Portland.
We're at a point where in about 5 years, we will have another housing crisis because we don't have enough in the pipeline. We need to bring to the table developers, housing advocates, home builders, and see what we can do to iron this out.
Another big issue, crime.
I continue to stay focused on my priorities, and my priorities are public safety remains the number 1 priority. That's why I created Portland Street Response, to create a non-law enforcement response to people suffering on our street.
So we need to reform and rebuild the police. You have to heed the calls of individuals.
We must end what some have called the defund police culture that makes it so difficult to recruit and retain quality officers.
Christine Pitawanich, KGW News.
The other big race in the city of Portland is between Commissioner Dan Ryan and his main challenger, A.J. McCreary. They debated over Zoom as well earlier this week and have very different positions on police and homelessness. First, some quick background. Dan Ryan was elected 20 months ago. Before that, from 2008 until 2019, he was CEO of a group called All Hands Raised, which helped guide 6 different school districts. He was diagnosed with AIDS back in 1995, but said new medicines gave him a new lease on life. A.J. McCreary describes herself as a single parent, light-skinned Black woman, community organizer, artist, renter, non-driver, and problem solver. Each was asked about police and whether Portland needs more. Their answers brought those stark differences. Here they are back to back, with Ryan going first.
I'm excited that with the DOJ negotiations, we will have a dean of training. That will be a civilian dean of training. That's definitely a step in the right direction. Body-worn cameras. will be implemented into the budget, where we will not allow the police to look at it before they write the report, but we'll have the transparency that Portlanders have been asking for. And so those are just a couple of the reforms that I'm really grateful for. I also like that in the police negotiations, we now have a really concrete, clear discipline guide. And so we're building transparency and we're building morale. Quite frankly, we have to recruit more police, but they can be police that are more like social workers. I look forward to the increase of peace officers on our streets.
My first response to the question is absolutely no. I think it's really important for us to look at, again, data. If we want a different experience, we need to do things differently.
And I'm sorry, you mean no, that we don't need more police officers on the street?
No to more police. Police are not keeping us safe. Police have a rooted history in white supremacy and harm. They were created to keep people enslaved. We cannot reform that experience. We can grow out of that. Investing in the Portland street response is critical, definitely having body cameras, but we cannot expect police to be solving the problems. We need to actually get to the root of the issues.
They were also asked about solutions for the homeless crisis and whether they favored short-term shelters or longer-term affordable housing. We'll have McCreary go first this time.
I'm really here for some long-term solutions. Currently, the reason why we have this crisis growing in the way that it is because we just keep moving short-term solution to short-term solution, moving houseless folks from being houseless outside to another different kind of houseless outside is inhumane and wrong. It's also a big waste of dollars. I know that our community at large would like to have a different experience, and we are a compassionate community and would like to see people taken care of. And so we really need to be looking at the income inequalities. We need to be looking at getting people into long-term solutions. We need to be thinking about home ownership. Shelters don't address any root issues. It just moves it from one place to the other.
And sure, there are so many people that can move quickly into housing. And then there's others who are on our streets who are suffering from dual addiction, like my brother. And we just happen to live in the state with the highest number of untreated addicts with the lowest number of treatment centers. And so I hope in the gubernatorial races continues to be a big issue, because being in last place for behavioral health and for mental health systems is not a winning combination. I know everyone that's on the street is not a dual diagnosis, but I do think that there are more than we admit. And I do think that the fact that Portland has drawn people actually to live here because we fortunately tolerate the intolerable with an open air drug market. And the new drugs are really harsh and very dangerous. I know this from talking to people on the streets.
So Ryan there favors shorter term services, McCreary into longer term affordable housing. Who's right? I don't know. I want to hear from you. Anything you loved or hated about any of those candidates you've just heard from? Start firing off your emails. I look forward to reading them, and I'll respond to as many as I can tonight. Our email address, by the way, is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. All the city's voters will ultimately decide who they want in Portland's primary. That'll be May 17th. And as a reminder, these city council races are runoffs, which means if one candidate gets 50%, they win. If no one does, the top two candidates go on to the November election. Moving on. A new law in Washington is putting pressure on the state's largest law enforcement agency to hire more people of color. Washington State Patrol has had problems with diversity for years. Most troopers are white men. PJ Rondawa has a look at how the agency now is trying to change that.
We are the Fab Four, 4 African-American commissioned female troopers in the State Patrol.
These are the faces the Washington State Patrol wants you to see.
We're fabulous.
Yeah, I got that. That's clear.
It's fun. It's us. It is. We have fun with it.
They're the patrol's new answer to a very old problem. Most Washington State Patrol troopers, specifically 86% of them, are white men. For 2 decades, that hasn't changed.
I'm proud to work for an agency that's willing to say that publicly, this is a problem and we're trying to fix it.
It's very much a good old boys club.
Former State Patrol cadet Liz Griffin of Lakewood is skeptical.
You're kind of seen as a threat.
14 years ago, she sued the patrol for discrimination, saying she was punished based on her sex and race.
I was told that I was too smart for my own good and that I should probably consider another profession. I was the only female of color.
Since then, the racial makeup of the agency hasn't changed much. We analyzed Department of Justice and state data and found diversity in the State Patrol has declined. Compared with 2003, the patrol now employs fewer Black, Asian, and Native American troopers.
I don't recall seeing any that looked like me. Younger people need to see themselves in professions like that.
Court documents show Liz was at the top of her class, an excellent cadet. But doing well, she says, didn't equate to being treated well.
My badge number was supposed to be 668. They would refer to me as Sex 8 instead.
1 week before graduation, Liz failed a practical exam. WSP policy states cadets should be given retraining and a makeup exam. But Liz Griffin didn't get that accommodation. Instead, she was terminated.
Yeah, I've experienced racism and sexism before, but this just felt like a bigger blow. Crushes your dreams.
We want to see an agency that reflects the community that we serve.
Former WSP trooper turned state senator John Lovick has raised these concerns for years.
This is 2022. There are only 30 Black troopers. It still has to be a pretty lonely world for most of them.
A 2021 state study shows applicants of color were failing the agency's psychological evaluation at a higher rate than their white counterparts. And there's a lot at stake. If you flunk the psych eval, you're out. The data shows 36% of white candidates didn't pass. Compare that with 44% of Latinx candidates, 67% of Asian candidates, and 60% of Black candidates, nearly double the number of white candidates who didn't pass the psychological evaluation.
I think the screening process was obviously a problem.
The man responsible for administering those tests, WSP's psychologist, Dr. Daniel Clark. Clark faced criticism from lawmakers after that 2021 report showed candidates of color were rejected from the patrol at high rates. The report found, quote, every focus group and multiple key executives reported concerns of bias in the psychological evaluation process. Clark kept his job. He's been reassigned at the State Patrol and now deals with counseling and training. We reached out to Clark for comment, but haven't heard back from him.
How do you feel knowing that Dr. Clark still has an active role in the WSP?
That blows my mind. Like, I cannot believe after what was found that he would still have any type of role. To see change, things have to be completely deconstructed and rebuilt from the bottom up.
Liz Griffin, the cadet who sued the patrol, doesn't see that happening. In 2014, her case was ultimately settled out of court for $20,000, with the agency making no admissions of liability.
What would you say that they missed out on with you?
Someone who really cares about people, someone who genuinely just wanted to be out there helping individuals.
State Patrol Chief John Batiste would not answer questions for this story, but the chief's daughter, Trooper Jonna Batiste, was made available to speak to us.
Is it fair to say that within the agency itself, you've never felt discriminated against or kind of othered because of the color of your skin?
Not othered because of the color of my skin, othered because of my gender, yes. Yeah. I don't think necessarily that color plays a part in that. It just is you're 5'2" and you're underestimated.
There were plenty of times when I showed up on scene and someone said, oh, I don't want you to help me, you're a girl. Where's the real trooper at? I am the trooper, so this is what you're gonna get, and I'm here to help you.
And I've taught more than one man how to change his own tire.
Oh yes, for sure.
By 2030, the hope is more troopers will look like the Fab Four.
The academy has grown so much in diversity.
We have a team of pretty diverse recruiters,
steering the agency to better represent the population it serves.
It's a great time to be a cadet.
We still have a lot of work to do.
That was PJ Rondawa reporting. Washington State Patrol, by the way, sent a statement saying, in part, one of the challenges of hiring a diverse workforce is competing with other law enforcement agencies, which are also looking to hire more candidates of color. The statement says, quote, with so many agencies now recruiting in the same smaller universe of interested and qualified applicants, our challenges filling the growing number of vacancies continue to grow. Portland Public Schools just put a teacher on leave, in part for encouraging students to oppose the expansion of Interstate 5 that would force their middle school to be relocated.
PPS feels threatened because Mr. Chu was helping us advocate for the school and the community.
Now, his students are protesting his removal from the classroom.
They took away our teacher without talking to us. Is our teacher not there?
When the story continues. Welcome back. Keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com or give us a call and leave a voicemail at 503-226-5090. Now, tonight we have an assignment for you. Those of you who live in Vancouver and Southwest Washington or who know stuff about that area, we're planning a show completely focused on that area. So we want you to tell us, what are the stories that we should cover over there? What's interesting? What's happening in the community? What issues do you care about? What has gone sideways that we should know about and highlight? Please let us know. Send us an email. Our main address is the one to use, thestory@kgw.com, or leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Now, I'm sure most of us can remember a favorite teacher who really made an impact on us. At Portland Middle School, some students are rallying in support of one of their teachers, who the district placed on leave. Students and staff say part of it has to do with his views on the I-5 expansion in the Rose Quarter that would relocate their school. Catherine Cook talked to some of the teens in his class after they walked out of school in protest.
What do we want him? Now!
On Wednesday, Harriet Tubman Middle School students walked out in support of social studies teacher Brian Chu. They say Portland Public Schools put Chu on paid leave starting Monday. Staff members tell KGW the district is investigating Chu for a number of reasons, including disruptions during school board meetings and coaching students into opposing the I-5 expansion. District officials would not confirm the reasons, citing privacy rules, but said, quote, "We also take the conduct of our professionals very seriously, and we expect a certain level of decorum in classrooms and in public."
They took away our teacher without talking to us. Is our teacher not there?
8th grader Sonia Seidman is in Mr. Chu's social studies class. She says one thing he's taught them is how to stand up for what they believe in. Words, she says, guided them on this day.
He was like, well, you know, if we ever have a walkout, like there's these signs in the cafeteria and you can just take them off the walls. And so we did that.
Sonia says Chu has also led discussions on ODOT's planned expansion of I-5 near the school, something he's protested outside of work hours. The district is planning to move Harriet Tubman Middle School because of the expansion.
He was like, do you think writing letters to the PPS board, like, he was like, that would be great. Like, do you guys want to do that? And we were like, yes.
Sonia says other than Chu providing them with board members' email addresses, students who wrote the letters did so at their own will. She has her own theory for why Chu is on leave.
PPS feels threatened because Mr. Chu was like helping us advocate for the school and the community. And he was the only one doing that.
Chu has a history of speaking out against the school district. In February, he was part of a group that interrupted a school board meeting. He accused the superintendent of lying about replacing HEPA filters and also swore.
That's a lie. What happened to GBC, bro? Yeah. Don't lie to us. We're in the school and we know what's going on.
During a 2017 board meeting, Chu criticized the district over its framework for middle school curriculum.
PPS, aka mostly BS. This is the crazy making that has become synonymous with PPS.
And in this 2018 guest opinion published in the Oregonian, Chu called the district white supremacist and patriarchal, among other things. For now, Mr. Chu's classes go on without him.
Doesn't need substitute there.
And while his future here is unclear,
I hope it could get better, the teacher can come back.
Sonia Seidman knows what she wants.
We as students value Mr. Chu so much, and we really need him in our school to thrive fully.
In North Portland, Catherine Cook, KGW News.
Still ahead, do you remember early in the pandemic when COVID spread like wildfire in the state prisons? Well, there's now a class action lawsuit accusing the state of not doing nearly enough to protect the inmates from the virus. When the story continues. Let's talk about COVID and its effect on a very vulnerable population, prisoners. It was just about 2 years ago when we started reporting on the rampant outbreaks in community settings like prisons, where people are not always able to stay 6 feet apart from others or isolate safely if they're exposed. Since then, 45 prisoners in Oregon have died of coronavirus and more than 5,000 others have gotten COVID. That's a bunch. Those prisoners and their families are part of a class action lawsuit now that was just approved by a federal judge. Juan Chavez from the Oregon Justice Resource Center explains how we got here.
This pandemic began 2 years ago, and really right at the beginning, we recognized that DOC here in Oregon, and they incarcerate up to 13,000 people in our state, we're not up to the task for keeping people safe. I think we heard enough stories from people on the inside, and we heard from the people at the top that gave us enough concern that we needed to file a lawsuit. So we filed in April of 2020 a lawsuit meant to get more protection for incarcerated people. Unfortunately, the judge denied our initial relief that we sought, and by that time people were already dying and getting sick. So we decided to pivot to a class action for money damages for anybody who catches COVID-19. And just this last week, the judge finally granted our request to make this a class action. So we are now a class of 5,000 plus people in 45 or so wrongful death estates.
We know courts can move at a snail's pace, so we can't really tell you how long it's going to take to resolve this case. But I want you to carefully listen to the next soundbite from Chavez, because I know some of you are watching at home and thinking the special attention on the prisoners, it's unwarranted. They were convicted of crimes.
This is a unique situation where the Constitution does require the government to take care of a certain set of people. I think us on the outside feel maybe that they're getting special privileges by having access to healthcare at the level that they're getting, but it's just fundamentally not the experience of people on the inside. They are still suffering a great deal and still struggle to get medical care in a lot of respects. But fundamentally, that's because that's how the Constitution is designed, and we need to be able to protect those folks. And so for that reason, it's really kind of limited to prisons. And even then, it's a high standard of what we call deliberate indifference. That's the standard we need to prove, and that's one that we'll hopefully meet.
By the way, this is the same group that successfully sued to get COVID vaccine priority for inmates. Remember that? Early last year, when the vaccine supply was limited, a judge ruled that prisoners should get their shots at the same time as people in long-term care facilities. Keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. When we come back, we'll meet some of the folks from the nonprofit we've been supporting all week and one of the people who's benefiting from them. It's time again for our Hey Help campaign. Here's the QR code for those of you who know what we're doing. If you want to donate, just hold your phone up to the screen. This is the moment when you can give a chance to help out for a nonprofit in our community. You're so generous, and so many of you helped so many different groups. We thank you. This is the group that we're helping this week. These workers are on the Springwater Trail with a nonprofit called Cultivate Initiatives. The group is focused on getting homeless folks temporary jobs to put some money in their pockets and raise their confidence and self-esteem. Sometimes a temporary job leads to full-time, which is what happened to Joseph Ahern, who said he was homeless for 16 years before now.
Absolutely. The greatest thing, one of the life-changing experience, absolutely. From 180 life-changing experience. Just from sleeping in a tent to having a 40-hour-a-week job to having an apartment, paying rent. Yeah, just absolutely amazing.
Yes, it is. I was out there, met those guys today. Impressive group. Here's the QR code again. You can also give online at kgw.com/heyhelp. And remember, it's a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount, no matter how small or how big. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. Remember, the story, our story, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.
This is KGW News.